When you think about what it takes to make peace, your mind probably goes to things like ceasefires, treaties, maybe peacekeeping forces. But what if there's a whole other layer to violence, one that we almost always miss? What if the real path to peace isn't just about stopping a fight, but about building a fundamentally better, fairer society from the ground up?
So let's just jump right in with a pretty provocative question. What if the best way to stop a war isn't with an army, but by building a school, or maybe a hospital, or even just a fair legal system? Now, I know that might sound a little strange at first, but it gets right to the heart of what we're going to dig into today, the hidden, structural roots of violence.
To really wrap our heads around that idea, we first have to expand our definition of violence. Because honestly, what we typically see on the news, that's just the final, explosive result of problems that have been simmering under the surface for a long, long time.
Okay, so here's the official definition from the World Health Organization. And yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. It talks about the intentional use of physical force or power that causes harm. And let's be real, this is the kind of violence we all know. It's what we see in movies, it's what we read about online.
And it usually looks something like this. It's a direct, observable act. It's immediate. It's physical. You can usually point to a person who did it and a person who was harmed. This is what makes the headlines. But this is only one tiny piece of a much, much larger puzzle.
In fact, you can think of this visible, direct violence as just the tip of a massive, and I mean massive, iceberg. The most dangerous part is almost always the part that's hidden way down below the surface, totally out of sight.
And this brings us to a really crucial distinction. Over on one side, you've got direct violence. That's the punch, the attack, the thing you can see. But on the other side, you have something called structural violence. And this isn't a punch in the face. It's a system that creates poverty. It isn't a single attack. It's decades of unequal access to healthcare. It's invisible, and it's woven into the very fabric of our society.
So what is structural violence exactly? Well, think of it this way. It's when the system itself, the social structures, the economy, the political institutions, is set up in a way that prevents people from reaching their full potential. The key here is there's no single person to blame. The harm is embedded in the system, creating unequal power and unequal life chances.
And this visual does a great job of showing what we mean. Structural violence is literally that gap you see between what a person could have achieved if they had fair opportunities and what they actually achieve because the system is holding them back. It's the wasted potential. And that loss, that gap, that is its own form of violence.
Okay, so how does all of this connect back to something like violent extremism or terrorism? Well, for decades, the global approach has basically been to fight fire with fire, right? Focusing almost entirely on direct physical force.
But here's the thing. Experts who have studied this for a long, long time are pretty clear. For 20 years, this security-first approach has, and I quote, repeatedly proven insufficient. It's obvious we can't just arrest or bomb our way to lasting peace. It just doesn't work.
And why hasn't it worked? Well, it's actually pretty simple when you think about it. Those methods only treat the symptoms, the attacks, the visible violence. They do almost nothing to address the underlying disease, the root causes that allowed extremism to grow in the first place.
So what are these root causes we're talking about? Well, they're going to sound familiar. They're the very essence of structural violence. Poverty that leaves people desperate, discrimination that pushes entire groups to the margins, corrupt governments that nobody trusts, deep, painful inequality that shuts people out from justice. These aren't the actions of extremists. These are the conditions that create an environment where extremism can look like the only answer. Thankfully, recognizing this failure has led to a huge shift in thinking. It's led to the development of a completely new playbook for how we deal with violent extremism. It's a strategy called P/CVE, which stands for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism. And its whole mission is to tackle the problem at its source. So instead of just reacting to violence after it happens, P/CVE is all about being proactive. It's about using non-forceful methods to get rid of those root causes we were just looking at.
And this, right here, is the big aha moment, the absolutely crucial insight. The things that fuel violent extremism, poverty, inequality, injustice, lack of education, these are the exact same problems the global community is already working on solving through development efforts. And that connection? Well, that's a total game changer.
So what this really means is that building a more peaceful world and building a more prosperous world aren't two separate projects at all. They're two sides of the same coin.
And you can see this perfectly in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Let's just take a look at a couple of examples, starting with the very first Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG, no poverty.
You see, a ton of research shows that extreme poverty creates these, well, they're called enabling environments. When people can't get basic necessities, when they have no hope for the future, extremist groups can swoop in. They can offer services, a sense of purpose, and gain a ton of credibility and support. So, by working to end poverty, we're directly shrinking the recruitment pool for these organizations.
And it's the exact same logic for other goals too. Take SDG 4, which is quality education, and SDG 5, gender equality. Now, on the surface, you might not think these have anything to do with national security, but they are absolutely fundamental to building societies that can resist extremism.
This is where it all comes together. Look at this. A quality education gives people the critical thinking skills to see through propaganda. Promoting gender equality makes sure our policies are actually effective and don't push anyone away. Providing decent work gives young people an alternative to joining a violent group. And reducing inequalities? That directly addresses the feelings of injustice and grievance that extremists are so good at exploiting. Every single step forward on development is a step away from violence.
When you step back and look at the whole picture, the 17 SDGs aren't just a to-do list for a better world. They are literally one of our best and most comprehensive roadmaps for a safer, more secure world too.
Okay, so that's the big global picture. It's a massive framework. But what does any of this have to do with us, in our own lives, in our own communities?
Well, the key takeaway is that this isn't just a job for governments or the UN. As this quote makes so clear, citizen engagement is crucial. Real lasting peace isn't handed down from on high. It's built from the ground up, by regular people working to make their own communities more fair, more just, and more inclusive for everyone.
And that really brings us full circle to the question I want to leave you with. This whole conversation isn't just about conflicts in some faraway place. Structural violence, things like unequal access to good schools, to healthcare, to justice, that can exist anywhere. So the real question for all of us is this: how can we start to identify and then address those hidden roots of violence right here, where we live?